Imagine walking into a room so vast it doesn't seem to have walls, just a shimmering twilight that stretches on forever. This was the Great Chamber of the Galactic Council, where pods for 73 different alien species floated in the air, their height perfectly arranged to show who was important and who wasn't. The whole place buzzed with 1,000 different languages, clicks, growls, and whistles, all magically turned into words everyone could understand. Right in the middle of it all stood Ambassador Sarah Chen, a lone human in a plain gray suit. She looked tiny. All around her, the powerful council members shifted in their pods, barely hiding their smirks. The air filled with sounds that the translators called laughter, while others just stared her down with their weird arrays of eyes and antennae. She had just read Earth's official request, and judging by the reaction, they thought it was the funniest thing they'd heard all year. "Hang on, let me get this straight," the speaker, Tom Vaughn, chirped, his three-part beak clicking with amusement. "Your species, who figured out how to travel faster than light just 80 of your years ago, wants to call dibs on a bubble of space 50 light-years wide all around your little solar system?" "That's correct," Chen said. Her voice was perfectly level, without a hint of the terror you'd expect from someone standing in front of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "And you actually expect every species that travels through space to respect this no-go zone?" Tom Vaughn's tone made it crystal clear that he thought the idea was a joke. "We expect all spacefaring species to avoid this region?" "Yes," Chen replied calmly. That did it. The chamber basically exploded with sounds the translators couldn't even keep up with. Definitely laughter, a lot of disbelief, and even some angry roars from the more aggressive species who felt insulted. But Ambassador Chen just waited. She didn't fidget. She didn't even break eye contact with the speaker's pod. She just stood there, hands clasped behind her back, letting them all get their outrage out. Finally, Tom Vaughn raised a wing, calling for quiet. The noise died down, but you could still feel the ridicule hanging in the air. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "your people have exactly 12 colonies. 12. The Zitharan Empire controls 47 entire star systems. The Marine Collective covers 300 worlds. Even the next youngest species here has been zipping between stars for 600 years. What on earth gives you the right to make a demand like this?" "We aren't demanding," Chen corrected him. "We are informing." "A difference without a distinction," a new voice boomed, deep and heavy with power. "Are you informing us, or are you threatening us?" Every head turned to the Zitharan pod. High Commander Velkoth leaned into view, his huge armored body filling the screen. Zitharans were giants, with thick hides and 4 massive arms. They'd built their empire by crushing anyone who got in their way. "We are not threatening anyone," Chen said, turning to face him. "We are setting a boundary. We're asking everyone to please respect it." "Ask?" Velkoth's mandibles spread into what passed for a smile on his species. "You ask nothing. You stand here and tell the most powerful council in the galaxy that a huge chunk of space now belongs to your baby civilization. And you expect us to just, what, nod and obey?" "Yes," Chen said. It was that simple. The High Commander let out a laugh that sounded like grinding boulders. "And if we refuse, are your 12 little colonies going to declare war on the rest of the galaxy?" "We hope it doesn't come to that," she said. "Hope." Velkoth puffed himself up, looking impossibly huge even on screen. "Let me tell you what I think of your hope, human. The Zitharan Empire has conquered species with technology you can't even dream of. We have turned fleets 10 times the size of your entire navy into dust, and you think you can tell us where we can and cannot fly?" Chen's expression never flickered. "Commander Velkoth, I would strongly advise you. You will advise nothing." His roar shook the chamber. "The main trade route between our space and the Outer Rim cuts right through your so-called exclusion zone. We've used it for 3,000 years. Do you honestly think we're going to change course because a species that still uses primitive fusion drives asks nicely?" "The route could be slightly adjusted," Chen offered. "It would add, maybe 6 days to the trip? A tiny inconvenience when compared to..." "Compared to what?" Velkoth sneered. Compared to the insult of suggesting the mighty Zithran Empire has to go around your pathetic little patch of space? He spread his arms wide. No, Ambassador Chen, we will not be adjusting our route. In fact, I think it's high time someone taught your species its place. The whole chamber fell silent. Even the aliens who were laughing just a minute ago were now watching intently. This wasn't just talk. When a Zitharan High Commander talked about teaching lessons, warships were sure to follow. Commander, Tom Von said, choosing his words carefully, perhaps we could discuss this with a bit more... There's nothing to discuss, Velkoth snapped. In 3 of your months, the Zitharan trade fleet will travel its traditional route right through the humans' little zone. If the humans have a problem with it, they're welcome to try and stop us. I have a feeling they'll learn very quickly why young species should listen when their elders speak. With that, he cut his transmission. His pod went dark. Chen just stood there, perfectly still. All around her, the council members started murmuring to each other. Some looked genuinely worried by what the Zitharan had declared. Others looked pleased, like humanity was about to get what it deserved. A few even looked at Chen with something that looked a lot like pity. Ambassador Chen, Tom Von said, all the amusement gone from his voice. The council can't tell an empire what to do. If the Zitharan fleet enters your space, we won't get involved. But I have to warn you, if you take any action against them, it will be considered an act of war. And in that fight, Earth will stand alone. We understand, Chen said. Do you really? A much older voice chimed in from one of the highest pods, where the most ancient species sat. Ambassador Creel of the Vorten Collective leaned forward, her ancient eyes locked on the human. Commander Velkoth wasn't bluffing. That Zitharan fleet will have at least 200 warships with it. Your entire navy has, what, 40 ships? And I hear they have terrible shields and weapons. 37 ships are currently operational, Chen confirmed without missing a beat. Then you have to see this as crazy, Creel said, her tone almost kind. Take back your declaration, apologize to the Zitharans, maybe offer them some trade deals. It's not too late to stop this disaster. Chen just shook her head slowly. We will not withdraw the declaration, then your people are going to die, Creel said, her voice flat. You're just children. I've watched empires older than your entire civilization rise and crumble. I know what happens when a little bit of pride gets in the way of common sense. The Zitharans will not show you any mercy. We're not asking for mercy. Then what are you asking for? Creel pressed. You have to want something. Nobody picks a fight this big for no reason. For the first time, Chen's mask of pure calm seemed to shift. A flicker of something in her eyes made a few of the nearby ambassadors lean back in their pods without even realizing it. We want to be left alone, she said, her voice quiet but clear. That is all we have ever wanted. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other, almost wiping ourselves out a dozen times over. We finally got our act together, looked to the stars and decided to join the galactic community in peace. And in 80 years, we've been invaded twice. We've had our trade ships stolen 7 times, and we've had to watch 3 of our new colonies get shaken down for protection money by bullies who see us as an easy target just because we're new here. Her voice was still calm, but her words were like daggers. We're tired, she went on. Tired of being tested, tired of being seen as easy prey. We are tired of having to explain over and over that we just want to build our future in peace. So we're drawing a line, a very clear line, and we are telling the entire galaxy as politely as we can not to cross it. Or what? It was Velkoth. His pod had lit back up. He'd been listening the whole time. What will you do, human? Your weapons are a joke. Your shields are weak. Your ships are slow. What could you possibly do to us? Chen turned to face his pod for the last time. We told you what we want, Commander. We showed you where our boundary is. If you choose to ignore that, it's your call. She paused, and her next words fell into the silent chamber like bombs. But don't say we didn't warn you. She gave a small bow to Speaker Tom Von, turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Pathetic, Velkoth scoffed. 3 months, human. In 3 months, we'll all see your exclusion zone is nothing but a fantasy. And maybe after we've sailed through your space without a scratch, Your people will finally learn a little humility." Chen stopped at the doorway but didn't turn back. 3 months, she agreed quietly. And then she was gone. For a long time after she left, the council chamber was dead silent. Finally, Tom Von spoke up. "Well, are there any other matters to discuss?" "Wait." The voice came from a pod that rarely ever spoke. Ambassador Yolen of the Koran Dominion, an ancient and peaceful species known for their wisdom, rose to his feet. Everyone looked at him, stunned. "I must speak," Yolen said, his voice ringing with importance. "I have been studying the humans. You know, it's a bit of a hobby of mine, studying other species. I've gone through their history, their art, even their philosophy. I've observed their behavior," Velkoth said, sounding completely unimpressed. "And I would suggest being cautious," Yolen added carefully. "Humans are different." "Different in what way?" Creel shot back. Ulin seemed to be searching for the right words. "They are a species that spent 90% of their entire existence at war with each other. They created nuclear weapons and aimed them at their own cities. They engineered diseases that could wipe out billions and kept them in labs. They came up with ways to poison their own air, boil their own seas, and even crack the crust of their own planet. And yet somehow, they never managed to completely destroy themselves. They got dangerously close dozens of times, but something always pulled them back from the very edge." "What are you trying to say?" Felixoth demanded. "My point, Commander, is that humans are exceptional at one thing above all else, discovering new and highly efficient ways to kill. They spent thousands of years perfecting that very art, and now that they've finally stopped fighting amongst themselves, you have to wonder what they've been pouring all that creative energy into." "Building colonies and fusion drives," Velkoth scoffed. "I'm not exactly trembling." "Maybe you should be," Ulin said softly. "When a human gives you a warning, Commander, it's because they have already figured out what to do after that warning is ignored. It's just how they operate. They don't make empty threats." Velkoth's laughter echoed through the chamber. "Then let them get ready. I can't wait to see what all their little preparations have amounted to. Maybe they've built 40 ships instead of 37. Perhaps they've boosted their shields by 5%. It won't make a difference." He cut the transmission, and this time his communication pod went dark for good. The council meeting wrapped up soon after. As the different ambassadors filed out, they formed small clusters, buzzing about the showdown they'd just seen. The general consensus was that humanity had gotten too big for its britches. Some felt a little sorry for what was about to happen to Earth's colonies. A handful, like Yuolin, voiced their concerns in private, but they were mostly brushed aside. In 3 months, the Zethran trade fleet would enter human space. 300 warships, the biggest display of power the Empire had put together in decades. It was meant to be a demonstration, Velkoth had declared, one that would echo across the galaxy for ages. He was right about that part at least, just not in the way he thought. The Zithran fleet gathered at the rally point 3 days early. Commander Velixoth was determined to make a point, and he definitely had. 300 warships hung in the blackness like a man-made constellation, their lights twinkling like a new galaxy against the backdrop of real stars. Every single ship was a beast, engineered for battle, wrapped in armor thick enough to laugh off most weapons in the known galaxy. Each one was armed with enough firepower to turn a small moon into dust. Felix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Will, and watched his fleet on the main view screen. A surge of pride swelled in his chest. This was true power. This was the force that had conquered 47 systems, and he was about to use it to teach one cocky young species a lesson they would never, ever forget. "All ships are reporting ready, Commander," his tactical officer announced. "Perfect." Velkoth eased into his command chair, which was specially designed for his enormous frame and 4 arms. "Broadcast this on all frequencies. I want everyone to hear it." The communications officer got to work. A few moments later, she nodded. "All channels are open, Commander." "Every ship within 30 light-years will pick this up." Velixoth leaned in, his voice shifting to the formal tone used for official declarations. "This is High Commander Velixoth of the Zaran Empire, addressing all vessels and settlements in this area of space. The fleet you see before you will now travel along our historic trade route, which passes through the region the human species has foolishly claimed as their own exclusive territory. We are doing this to prove a very simple fact. Young species do not get to set the rules for their elders. The Zythan Empire travels where it wants, when it wants. Any attempt to obstruct our passage will be seen as an act of war and will be answered with the complete and total might of the Imperial force. This isn't a threat. This is a simple statement of reality. He made a sharp cutting gesture with his hand, and the broadcast stopped. "Set our course," he commanded. "Standard formation, scanners at maximum range. If the humans have any ships lying in wait for us, I want to know about them long before we get there." The entire fleet moved as a single entity, hundreds of ships making the exact same turn, accelerating in unison toward the edge of human space. The formation was breathtaking in its precision and terrifying in its scale. Faloth had picked the old trade route on purpose because it sliced right through the middle of the human exclusion zone. He wanted there to be no misunderstanding, no way for the humans to pretend he had just tiptoed around the edge of their territory. He was going to march right through the heart of their so-called space, and nobody was going to stop him. The trip to the boundary line took 6 hours at the fleet's standard cruising speed. Felixoth used the time to look over tactical reports and battle plans. He didn't really think the humans would try to stop him, but if they did, he wanted the response to be swift and crushing. A quick, decisive smackdown would be a much better lesson than just cruising by unchallenged. "Commander," his sensor officer called out, "we are now approaching the boundary coordinates from the human declaration. Any sign of human ships?" "No, sir. Scanners are showing nothing but empty space ahead. No ships, no stations, no defense platforms. Absolutely nothing." Faloth felt a mix of satisfaction and disappointment. Satisfaction because his hunch was right. The humans had absolutely nothing to back up their ridiculous claim. And disappointment because there wasn't going to be a real fight, no chance to show off Zythan combat superiority. "Keep moving forward," he ordered. The fleet glided across the invisible line that marked the start of the human exclusion zone. Faloth made a note of the exact time in the ship's log. He wanted the history books to show that the Zythan Empire had treated human demands with the utter contempt they deserved. Space looked identical on both sides of the line. The same faraway stars, the same empty blackness. The human exclusion zone was just like any other patch of space, totally empty and harmless. "Maintain your course," Felixoth said. "What's our estimated time to cross the exclusion zone?" "At our current speed, about 8 days, Commander," his navigation officer answered. "All right. I want scanner sweeps every 10 minutes. If a single human ship even thinks about approaching, I want to know about it instantly." The first 3 hours went by without a single issue. The fleet pushed steadily deeper into the zone, holding its perfect formation. Velkov took a stroll through the different parts of his flagship, checking on the crew, making sure everyone was ready even though he wasn't expecting a fight. Back in the command center of the dominant will, the tactical displays showed the positions of all 300 ships, each one precisely where it was supposed to be. Velkoth let himself enjoy a brief moment of pride. This day would be remembered. It was the day the Zarin Empire proved that human warnings were nothing but empty bluffs. Just then, the sensor officer spoke up again. "Commander, we've got a contact. A single small ship coming in from Galactic North." Beloth hurried over to the sensor station. "What's the analysis?" It's definitely human design, sir. The fusion signature is a match for their standard drives. Its mass suggests it's a research vessel, not a military ship. It doesn't even have shields." "A research vessel?" Felixoth scowled. "Get them on screen." The communications officer tapped at her console for a second. "They're answering, Commander. Putting them up now." The main view screen flickered, then showed a small bridge, incredibly cramped compared to Zytheran standards. A human woman in a plain jumpsuit stood in the middle of it. Behind her, Velkoth could make out maybe 4 other crew members at their stations. "This is Captain Maria Torres of the research vessel Cassandra," the woman said. Her voice sounded weary, like she'd had this exact conversation too many times before. "You are currently trespassing in Earth's exclusion zone. Turn back immediately. This is your final warning." Bellix just stared at the screen, bewildered. Then he started to laugh. All around the bridge, his crew started laughing with him. "Your final warning?" he repeated, chuckling. "Captain Torres, take a look around you. I have 300 warships, and any one of them could vaporize your little ship with a single shot. And you're giving me warnings?" Torres nodded slowly. "I see your ships, Commander. They are very impressive. But I'm still telling you to turn back? Or what?" Veloth's good mood was starting to sour. "What are you going to do with your tiny science ship? Ram us?" "I'm not going to do anything," Torres said. "But if you keep moving forward, something else will. Please, Commander, turn back. Just take the long way around. It only adds 6 days to your trip. It's such a tiny price to pay." "The only price being paid today," Velkoth growled, "is the one for your arrogance. You have 30 seconds to get your ship out of our way, or we will move it for you." Torres closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them again, Velkoth saw something he didn't expect in her gaze. It wasn't fear or even anger. It was just sadness. "Then I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry we couldn't get through to you. I'm sorry for what's about to happen, and I'm sorry that we tried so hard to find another way, but you forced our hand." 20 seconds, Velkoth snapped. "My crew and I volunteered for this." Torres continued, her words coming faster now. "We all put our names in, knowing what could happen. We drew straws to see who would get to be the last voice you heard, the last one who tried to warn you. I won. 10 seconds. Our families know. They're proud of us. We all left messages for them. Mine said, 'Fire!'" Velkoth commanded. The weapons officer hit a single button. A brilliant lance of superheated plasma shot across the void between the dominant will and the Cassandra. In the blink of an eye, the tiny research vessel didn't even try to dodge. It just vanished in a silent, brilliant flash of light. They thought they had just crushed a fly with a hammer, but they had actually just walked straight into the perfect trap. Stick around to find out how this one tiny ship took down an entire fleet without firing a single shot. "Resume course," Commander Velkoth said quietly on the bridge. But he felt no satisfaction, only a strange unease. The human captain's last words echoed in his mind. She had been so calm, so accepting of her fate, as if this exact moment was all part of a much bigger plan. He shook the thought away. The Cassandra was nothing. A nuisance. Its destruction changed absolutely nothing. He commanded, "All ships maintain formation, continue forward." The fleet of 300 warships obeyed, pushing through the patch of empty space where a human ship had just burned. 2 hours passed, then 3. Velkoth remained on the bridge, sending his crew to rest in shifts. Something felt deeply wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Space looked normal. Scans showed nothing out of the ordinary. Every single system in the fleet was operating at peak efficiency. "And yet, Commander," the sensor officer said, her voice laced with uncertainty, "I'm getting something. It's not a ship, not anything solid. Just strange readings." "Define strange." "I don't know how to describe it, sir. The sensors are showing fluctuations in local space-time. They're not dangerous, just unusual. It's as if space itself is rippling." "Localized gravitic distortion," Velkoth suggested, "a natural phenomenon." "Maybe," she replied, "but I've never seen anything quite like this before. It's almost like—" She trailed off, focused on her instruments. "Sir, it's moving with us. The readings are staying at a constant distance from the fleet, matching our speed exactly." Now, Velkoth felt a spike of real concern. "How is that possible?" "I don't know, sir." "Are we in any danger?" I don't think so. The readings are weak. Whatever it is, it's not interfering with our systems. It's just there." Velkoth made a decision. "Increase scanner power. I want a full analysis of this phenomenon and send a message to all ships. I want to know if anyone else is detecting the same thing." The replies came back within minutes. Every single ship in the fleet reported the exact same readings. The phenomenon surrounded them completely, a strange ripple in space that was shadowing their every move. "Could it be a sensor malfunction?" Velkoth asked. Across 300 ships, sir, with different sensor arrays and manufacturers? Highly unlikely. So what was it? Nobody had a clue. The fleet pushed onward, but the weird readings didn't go away. They never got stronger, never got weaker. They just hovered around us like a constant silent shadow that mimicked our every move. Over the next few hours, other little problems started popping up. Minor glitches in the nav systems, quick little power surges, and lag in communications that should have been instantaneous. Nothing major, not the kind of stuff that would usually raise an alarm, but when you added it all up, a thick blanket of unease settled over the entire fleet. Felixoth demanded a full diagnostic on every system. The reports all came back clean. Every single ship's computer swore that all systems were running perfectly. But the glitches kept happening, as if something was messing with us in a way our own technology couldn't even see. "Commander," his communications officer said nervously, "it's the Relentless, one of our destroyers on the outer perimeter. They've gone silent." Velkoth spun around to face her. "Define silent." "No response to any hails, sir. They're still showing up on sensors, still in perfect formation, but they're not responding to any of our calls." "Jamming?" "No indication of jamming, sir. The channel is wide open. They're just not answering." A cold dread began to settle in Velkoth's chest. "Send a message to the ships closest to the Relentless. Tell them to get a visual. I want to know what's happening over there." He waited, his eyes glued to the tactical display. The Relentless kept moving in formation, holding its position perfectly. Its engines were working. Its systems all seemed to be online. So why weren't they answering? "Sir," the communications officer said, her voice trembling now. "The ships we sent to check on the Relentless, they've gone silent too." The cold dread in Velkoth's chest turned to ice. "How many?" "2 destroyers, sir, the Iron Fang and the Stormbreaker. Both were approaching the Relentless to get a visual. Both of them stopped responding about 30 seconds ago." Velkoth stared at the tactical map. 3 ships, all marked with green, fully functional icons, but none of them were responding. "Are they still moving?" "Yes, sir, still holding formation perfectly." "Then who's flying them?" No one dared to answer. Velkoth made a command decision he knew he might live to regret. "Halt the fleet! All stop, now!" The order shot through the ships. 300 vessels began to slow down, coming to a dead stop in the emptiness of space. 300 vessels, except for 3. The Relentless, the Iron Fang, and the Stormbreaker just kept going, maintaining their original course and speed, pulling away from the rest of the fleet. "They're not responding to the stop order," the navigation officer stated the obvious. Velkoth watched the 3 green dots grow smaller on the display, sailing away from the safety of the fleet. He waited for them to stop, to turn, to do anything that showed living people were in control. They did nothing. They just kept flying straight ahead. Deeper and deeper into the exclusion zone they went, until they were too far away to see. "Commander," the sensor officer whispered, "they just vanished." "What?" "The 3 ships. They're gone, not destroyed. There's no debris, no explosion. They're just gone. Our sensors show nothing where they should be." Velkoth's breathing grew shallow. All around the bridge, his crew stared at their consoles in disbelief. "Find them," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep. They have to be somewhere." For an entire hour they searched. Long-range scans, short-range scans, visual sweeps, everything they could think of. 3 destroyers, each with a crew of 200, had simply ceased to exist. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Velkoth heard Captain Torres's voice again. "I'm sorry for what's going to happen." What had the humans done? What kind of nightmare had he led his fleet into? Commander Velkoth hadn't slept in 36 hours. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Will, staring at tactical displays that made less and less sense. Around him, his crew worked in quiet desperation, searching for answers that weren't there. The fleet had now lost 47 ships, not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone, as if they had never existed in the first place. One minute, they were there on the sensors, holding perfect formation. The next, there was just empty space. No explosions, no debris fields, no distress calls, nothing. The disappearances didn't follow any logical pattern Velkoth could find. Ships on the outside of the formation vanished. Ships right in the very center vanished. Massive battlecruisers and tiny frigates disappeared without any rhyme or reason. The only thing that was consistent was that once a ship went silent, it was already too late. Within minutes, sometimes seconds, it would just blink out of existence. "Report," Velkoth demanded. His voice was raw from shouting orders. "Fleet count is down to 253 vessels, Commander," his tactical officer said. She looked completely drained. Her scales had lost their healthy shine, and her hands trembled as she worked her console. "We have lost 6 more ships in the last hour." 6 ships. That was more than 12,200 crew members gone. "Damage reports?" "No damage to report, sir. All ships that haven't disappeared are showing green across the board. All systems nominal." That was the most terrifying part. The ships that were left were perfectly fine. There were no system failures, no battle damage, no sign of any attack. Crews were reporting a deep feeling of unease, like they were being watched. But the ships themselves worked flawlessly, right up until the moment they vanished. What about the sensor readings, the spatial distortions? "They're getting stronger, Commander. The rippling effect is much more intense now. Some of our sensor techs are reporting strange feedback. They say it's as if space itself is alive all around us." Velkoth felt his jaw tighten with stress. "That's not scientifically possible." "No, sir, it's not." He turned to his communications officer. "Any response from the humans?" "Negative, sir. We've been broadcasting on all frequencies, requesting a conversation, an explanation, anything. We've gotten nothing back. Either they weren't listening, or they were choosing not to answer. Or maybe they were all dead too," Velkoth thought grimly. If whatever was erasing his fleet was also hitting the human settlements, there might be no one left to answer. But he didn't believe that. Deep down, he knew the humans were out there somewhere, watching this happen. "Commander!" the navigation officer shouted, his voice tight with panic. "We have a problem with the jump coordinates." "What kind of problem?" "I've been calculating jump routes to get us out of here, dozens of them, to different destinations, everything I can think of. But every single calculation, no matter where I set the destination, shows us jumping deeper into the exclusion zone." Velkoth crossed the bridge in 3 long strides. "Let me see." The navigator put the calculations up on the main screen. Velkoth studied them, his own training in advanced physics allowing him to understand the impossible math. The officer was right. Every single escape route, no matter the destination, curved right back toward the center of the human exclusion zone. It was as if space itself had been warped into a giant cosmic whirlpool, pulling everything and everyone toward a single, inescapable point. "This is just not possible," Velkoth muttered. "To do this, you'd have to be bending space-time on a scale I can't even fathom. The power required would be beyond anything we've ever imagined." The navigation officer looked up, his face pale. "Yes, sir, but the numbers don't lie. We can't jump out of this area. We're stuck." That one word, stuck, just hung there in the air like a death sentence. Trapped. "Fine, we do this the old-fashioned way," Velkoth declared. "Plot a course back to the exclusion zone border using sublight engines. We'll go back the way we came." "We already tried, sir. The ships that tried turning around, they vanished even faster than the ones that kept going forward. It's like moving backward sets something off. Then we move forward." "Sir, forward takes us right into the heart of the zone, deeper into human territory." Velkoth wanted to scream, but he locked it down, keeping his voice steady. "Are you telling me the only direction we can go is straight toward Earth?" "That's how it looks, sir." A new voice cut in from the comm station. "Commander, we have an incoming transmission. It's on human frequencies." Every head on the bridge snapped around. After hours of suffocating silence, the humans were finally talking. "Put it on screen," Velkoth commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, but there was no human face, just simple, stark text. White letters against a black void. Our translation software stuttered for a second before displaying the message in our own script. "You were warned." That was it. 3 little words. Then the signal cut out. Velkoth just stared at the blank screen for a long time. Around him, the entire crew sat frozen in stunned silence. "Reply," he finally choked out. "Tell them we got their message. Tell them we're requesting immediate talks to negotiate our withdrawal." The comms officer's fingers flew across his console. "Message sent, sir." And then they waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Nothing. "Sir," the tactical officer said, her voice trembling slightly, "we lost 3 more ships just in the time we've been waiting." Veliksov's 4 hands curled into tight fists. His breath came in short, angry gasps. He had walked his fleet right into this nightmare. He had brushed off the warnings. He had blown the Cassandra to pieces and laughed at Captain Torres's last words. And now, his people were the ones paying the ultimate price. "All ships," he announced, opening a fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Velkoth. We've stumbled into something we don't understand. Whatever this is, it seems to be some kind of human defense grid. We can't jump out. We can't turn back without making things worse. Our only choice is to push forward and pray we can cross the exclusion zone before—" He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Before what? Before they all just blinked out of existence? "Stay in tight formation," he continued. "Every ship reports any little thing that seems off immediately. Navigation, find us the fastest way through this mess. I don't care if it takes us right past Earth's front door. We have to get out of this sector." "Sir," his sensor officer whispered, her voice barely there, "you need to see this." Velkoth walked over to her station. She pulled up a display of the space around them. At first, it just looked like empty blackness. But then she started cycling through frequencies, shifting into a visual spectrum our Zithan eyes can't normally see. Veliksov's blood ran cold. We weren't flying through empty space at all. We were surrounded by something, some kind of massive structure. It looked like an impossibly huge web stretching out in every direction as far as the eye could see. And there were threads, tiny filaments of something that wasn't solid or energy, connecting that web to every single one of our ships. "What in the world am I looking at?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. It's been here the whole time. We just couldn't perceive it until I ran a full-spectrum scan. I think it's a field of some kind. A network. It has us completely boxed in." "And the ships that vanished?" She pulled up the sensor logs from right before a destroyer disappeared. On the screen, Velkoth watched as the thread attached to one of his destroyers suddenly flared with light. It pulsed, and then it tightened. The ship looked like it was being crumpled, its very shape twisting in ways that made your head hurt. And then, poof, it was just gone. The threads lingered for a second, almost like they were satisfied before fading back. "It's eating them," the sensor officer whispered in horror. "The field, or whatever this thing is, it's consuming our ships." For the first time in his long military career, Velkoth felt real, gut-wrenching fear. He'd been in dozens of battles and faced death more times than he could remember, but he'd always known his enemy. You can fight ships, you can counter weapons, you can even face impossible odds with good tactics. But this? How do you fight space itself? How do you attack an enemy you can't see, can't target, and can't even begin to understand? "Commander!" The communications officer's shout snapped him out of his trance. "Another transmission, not from the humans, sir. It's from the Endless Conquest, Captain Than's battlecruiser. They're reporting they see something. Put him through." Captain Than's face appeared on the screen. He was an old veteran, older than Veliksov, a hero of countless wars, and Veliksov had never, ever seen him look scared. He looked terrified now. "Commander, I don't even know how to explain this. My crew is seeing things, visual glitches, shadows moving between the ships where nothing should be. And sir, 3 of my crew just vanished from inside sealed sections of my ship." "Vanished for Otson from inside the ship?" "Yes, sir. We have the security footage. 1 second they're walking down a hallway, the next they're just gone, like they stepped through a doorway that wasn't there and just never came back." Before Velkoth could even process that, another alarm blared. "Multiple ships are reporting the same thing," the tactical officer cried out, her voice cracking. "Crew members are disappearing from inside their own ships. Equipment is vanishing. Some ships say entire sections have gone dark. And when they send teams to check it out, the sections are just empty, completely bare, like everything inside, including the search party, just ceased to exist. The situation was falling apart faster than Velkoth could think. It wasn't just about ships vanishing anymore. Whatever had trapped them was now reaching inside their hulls, plucking out people and equipment like a predator carefully picking meat from a bone. "All ships, lockdown procedures now," Velikoth ordered, knowing deep down it was a useless gesture. "No one goes anywhere alone. Stay in groups of at least 4. Seal all non-essential decks." The orders flew out across the fleet. They were obeyed, and they didn't make a single bit of difference. Over the next 6 hours, Velikoth was forced to watch his fleet die, not in a blaze of glory, but slowly, piece by piece, as if something was savoring the process. It was taking its time because it had all the time in the universe, and his fleet had absolutely nowhere to run. Ships kept disappearing. Now they were going 2 at a time, sometimes 3. The web around them seemed to glow brighter with each ship it consumed, like it was feeding. Crew members vanished from locked rooms, from guarded posts, from the very command bridges of their ships. One second they were there, the next they were gone, leaving behind nothing but terrified witnesses who couldn't explain the impossible thing they had just seen. A few ships reported hearing the voices of their missing crew over the comms, screaming, pleading for help, saying they were trapped in some other place, a place that was wrong, a place where it hurt just to exist. Then the screaming would just stop, and the channel would fall silent. Velkoth got a report that the Iron Storm, one of his biggest battlecruisers, was found adrift without a single person on board. All 800 souls had just vanished from a ship that had no damage, no signs of a fight. The ship was perfect, clean, still running on autopilot, just empty. When a rescue team went aboard to figure out what happened, they disappeared too. After that, Velikoth gave the order to stop investigating. There was no point. Whatever was doing this didn't play by any rules he knew, and every time they tried to understand it, more of his people died. "What's the fleet count?" he asked, his voice a hollow echo of itself. 12 ships left, Commander," the tactical officer replied. He could see she'd been crying. He didn't blame her. "At the current rate, we estimate total fleet loss in under 18 hours. 18 hours. In less than a day, 300 ships and over 500,000 of his people would be completely wiped from the universe. "Keep trying to hail the humans," Velkoth said, his voice cracking. Tell them we surrender. Tell them we'll pay anything. Tell them we recognize their claim to this entire sector. Tell them anything they want to hear. Just make them stop this." The comms officer typed furiously, blasting out messages on every known frequency, begging, pleading, promising the universe if the humans would just please answer the call. For 3 agonizing hours, they sent 147 distress calls into the void, but only silence answered. The Zythan war fleet, a force that had shattered worlds, could only press forward into the invisible trap that was slowly tearing them apart. There was a pulsing energy net all around them, feeding on their ships, and they were utterly helpless. Commander Velkoth couldn't shake the image of the human captain they'd just destroyed, her sad eyes, her last-minute plea. She knew this was waiting for them. They had all known. The humans had tried to warn them, tried to save them from their own pride, but the Zythan High Command was too arrogant to listen. "Commander," his sensor officer stammered, his voice thin with panic, "I'm picking something up ahead. It has a human design." A wild, desperate hope surged through Velkoth. "Get them on screen, now!" he roared. "Working, sir. They're responding." A calm human face filled the main view screen. A middle-aged human man in a crisp military uniform stared at Velkoth, his expression something close to pity. "Commander Velkoth," the man said, "my name is Captain James Rivera. I'm here to serve as a witness." "Witness?" The word made no sense to Velkoth. "We need your help. Your system, whatever it is tearing my fleet apart. You have to make it stop." Rivera gave a slow, regretful shake of his head. "I'm afraid I can't do that. No one can. The moment you crossed into the exclusion zone without clearance, the defense grid came online automatically. It can't be shut down while unauthorized ships are still inside. Then give us authorization. Please, we'll turn around and leave right now. You can't leave, Rivera said, his voice gentle. The grid won't let you. I'm sorry, Commander. I genuinely am, but we warned you over and over again. You decided not to listen. This is a slaughter, Velkoth roared. No, Rivera corrected him calmly. This is self-defense. You brought an armed fleet into our sovereign space after we explicitly told you not to. You destroyed our vessel, the Cassandra, when it made one last attempt to save you. Every life lost here is the direct result of the choices you made. We had no idea. We didn't realize what you'd built. That's precisely why we warned you, Rivera said. It's why we created the exclusion zone. It's why we pleaded with the Galactic Council to make every species understand that our borders were not up for negotiation. We did everything in our power to avoid this day. But in the end, you forced our hand. On Velkoth's tactical screen, 3 more of his ships simply blinked out of existence. What is it? Velkoth asked, his voice cracking with despair. What did you do to this part of the galaxy? Rivera paused for a long moment, then seemed to make up his mind. During our last global war, before we unified as a planet, we created weapons we prayed we'd never have to use. One of them was a theoretical model for weaponizing space-time itself, creating fields that could trap, contain, or simply erase anything that entered them. We never turned it on ourselves. We buried the research, locked it away, but when we reached for the stars and found out just how hostile the galaxy could be, how many would see us as easy targets? He trailed off. We built 50 of them, Div. 50 fully autonomous defense platforms scattered throughout the exclusion zone. Each one generates a field that can detect, analyze, and neutralize any ship that isn't authorized. They're powered by quantum vacuum energy. They'll run for 10,000 years without needing a single repair. You've turned your entire border into a cosmic graveyard, Velkoth whispered in horror. We've turned our border into a warning with teeth, Rivera corrected. Every other race in the galaxy defends their territory with fleets, ships that can be broken, fleets that can be beaten. We decided that anyone who wanted to invade human space wouldn't be fighting human ships. They'd be fighting space itself, and you can't win a war against space. Velkoth's tactical display now showed only 87 ships remaining. As he watched, the number dropped to 84. You're monsters, he breathed. Perhaps, Rivera conceded. But we are alive, we are free, and no one will ever threaten our home again. He paused. For what it's worth, Commander, I truly am sorry. I hope you realize we never wanted this. We just wanted to be left alone. The transmission cut out. Velkoth stood on his bridge, a lone figure watching his fleet vanish piece by piece, knowing with chilling certainty that he would not survive to see another sunrise. His very last thought, as the fabric of reality around his own ship began to glow and shimmer, was that the humans hadn't been lying. They had warned him, and he had refused to listen. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Galactic Council chamber was filled to capacity. Every species, every coalition, every political power with a voice had sent a delegate. They sat in their designated pods in a thick, heavy silence, waiting for the session to start. It had been 2 weeks since the Zithran fleet had breached the human exclusion zone. 2 weeks since 300 warships and more than 500,000 souls had disappeared without a single trace. The silence in the chamber wasn't one of respect. It was one of pure terror. Speaker Tom Von rose from his pod, his complex beak trembling almost imperceptibly as he spoke. This emergency session of the Galactic Council is now called to order. The topic before us is the utter disappearance of the Zithran Imperial Trade Fleet, whose last known coordinates were inside the territory claimed by the human species from Earth. He took a breath, as if steeling himself for the words to come. Ambassador Chen of Earth has consented to address the Council. I must remind everyone present, this is a diplomatic inquiry, not a trial. All delegates are instructed to maintain order and permit the ambassador to speak without interruption. Sarah Chen walked into the chamber from the main entrance, crossing the immense floor alone to take her position in the center. She looked identical to how she had 3 months prior, dressed in the same understated gray suit, her face a mask of impenetrable calm. She did not look like a person who had just orchestrated what could be the single largest mass killing in the history of the galaxy. "Ambassador Chen," Tom Von said cautiously, "this council is requesting any information you have about the fate of the Zitharan fleet. Can you give us any answers?" "Yes," Chen replied simply. That one word sent a shockwave through the room. She wasn't denying her role. She wasn't pleading ignorance. Just, yes. "Then please," Tom Von urged, "tell us what happened." Chen scanned the chamber, her eyes meeting those of several different ambassadors. When she finally spoke, her voice was clear and steady, reaching every corner of the room. "The Zitharan fleet entered our exclusion zone against our repeated warnings. They were made aware of the boundaries. They were told not to cross them. They made the choice to proceed anyway. Our automated defense systems activated as they were designed to. The fleet was neutralized." The chamber exploded. Cries in a dozen different languages created a chaotic roar of disbelief, fear, and outrage. Tom Von had to bang his gavel for order 3 separate times before the noise died down enough for him to speak. "Do you admit you're doing this to us?" Velkoth demanded. "I confirm that our automated defense system is working as designed," the human Chen replied, his voice unnervingly steady. 500,000 souls, screamed Acting Commander Vishkol from his station, his scales flushed dark with fury. "You've wiped out 500,000 of my people, and you just sit there calmly admitting it." Chen's gaze shifted to him. "Yes, Commander. And I am truly sorry for your loss," Chen said, his voice laced with a cold sadness. "But your people were warned. We warned you at the council session 3 months ago. We warned you again when you crossed into our territory. And when a lone research ship, the Cassandra, made one final desperate attempt to plead with you, your High Commander chose to treat it as an act of aggression. He destroyed that ship and its crew, and then he chose to fly his fleet straight into the consequences. The results of those choices are his alone." "You slaughtered them!" Vreshkal bellowed. "We defended our sovereign territory," Chen corrected, her voice still perfectly level. "The distinction is critical. This council must condemn these actions," Vreshkal pleaded, looking around the chamber for allies. "We can't allow a single species to claim the right to obliterate entire fleets without consequence. Today it was the Zitharans. Tomorrow it could be any one of you." He had a valid point, and many in the council nodded in agreement, but others just looked terrified. Then, Ambassador Creel of the Van Collective spoke, her ancient voice slicing through the tension. "Ambassador Chen, I have a question which I feel gets to the very heart of this issue. You state that your defense systems responded as designed. What precisely are these systems? How did they manage to eliminate 300 warships so completely that we can't find a scrap of debris, a single survivor, not even a faint energy signature?" Chen was quiet for a moment, weighing her options. "If we were to explain our defensive technology," she finally said, "we would be sharing classified military secrets with the entire galaxy. That is not a step we take lightly. However, considering the gravity of the situation, the government of Earth has authorized me to give a limited briefing." She touched a small device in her hand, and massive holographic displays materialized above her head, visible to everyone. They showed impossibly complex equations, 3-dimensional maps of space-time geometry, and schematics that looked more like pieces of abstract art than engineering blueprints. During our final global war, before Earth was united, several nations were developing theoretical weapons based on the manipulation of space-time itself. The research was deemed too dangerous, too ethically fraught, and was eventually abandoned. When we started exploring the galaxy and discovered the level of hostility we would encounter, we revisited that old research. We spent 60 years refining the theory and another 20 years building the platforms. The result is what we call the exclusion net. She manipulated the display, which now showed a map of their territory. 50 glowing points of light appeared, spread evenly throughout the region. 50 autonomous platforms. Each one generates a field that permeates the entire exclusion zone. The fields overlap, creating a seamless net of warped space-time. When an unauthorized ship enters the zone, the net activates and And does what? Creel pressed. It isolates them, Chen said. The ships are not blown up. They don't disintegrate. They are folded into pocket dimensions, separate quantum realities that exist parallel to our universe but can never interact with it. From the viewpoint of normal space, they simply cease to be. A collective gasp of horror swept through the chamber. Representatives from several species made religious signs of warding. Others just stared, their minds struggling to comprehend. Are you saying, Tom Von uttered slowly, that the Zithran fleet is still out there, trapped in another dimension? In a sense, Chen confirmed, although exists may be too strong a word. The pocket dimensions were never intended to support life. They have no recognizable laws of physics, no concept of time as we know it. Anything sent inside is effectively flash frozen, held in a state that is neither living nor dead. It's called quantum stasis. That's an abomination, someone whispered. And it's effective, Chen countered, her voice as cold and vast as the space they had weaponized. Imagine being so sure you're the toughest bully on the playground that you walk right up to the quiet new kid and spit in their face, only to find out that kid's dad is a world champion boxer. That's basically what happened to the Zithan Empire. You've sentenced my people to endless agony, the Zithan commander Freshcall roared, his voice cracking with rage. Trapped forever in a living nightmare because of your so-called exclusion zone. If you've ever felt underestimated and wished you could show the world what you're really made of, you're going to want to hear what happened next. That's a pretty dramatic way to put it, Ambassador Chen replied, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to his fury. It's actually the opposite of agony. They feel nothing. Time is frozen for them. They aren't suffering because they aren't experiencing anything. Think of it less like torture and more like being put into a deep sleep. The reptilian ambassador, Creel, leaned forward. Is it possible to bring them back? He asked. In theory, yes. If we were to shut down the platforms and let the energy fields collapse, anything caught inside would pop right back into normal space, Chen explained. But turning it off would leave our homeworld completely defenseless, and we have absolutely no plans to do that. Freshcall slammed his fist on his console. So they are lost to us forever. Chen's gaze hardened. They were lost the second Commander Velixoth gave the order to ignore our warnings and cross into our territory. We couldn't have been more clear, Commander, Chen stated, her eyes sweeping across the silent council chamber. We sent warnings on every channel. Your High Commander decided to gamble, betting that a young species like ours was just bluffing. He bet that we couldn't possibly have the firepower to stop a full Zythan battle fleet. She paused for effect. He was wrong, and while that's a tragedy, it isn't murder. A heavy silence filled the great hall. You could see the alien representatives glancing at one another, a silent conversation passing between them. It was a mixture of fear and a newfound respect, a complete recalculation of humanity's place in the galaxy. The council speaker, a being of pure energy named Tom Von, shimmered. Ambassador Chen, we will need to discuss this, but I have one last question for you. Now that you've revealed these weapons exist, and even shown us a little of how they work, Tom Von continued, aren't you worried that other races will now try to copy them or build something to counter them? A small, cold smile touched Chen's lips for the first time. Let them try, she said simply. The science behind it involves a level of quantum physics that took us centuries to master. Even with what I've told you today, it would take most of you hundreds of years to even get started. And by then, she added, our technology will be generations ahead. The exclusion net you're so worried about, that's first-generation tech, speaker. We're already testing generations 2 and 3. She let that thought hang in the air for a moment. But more than that, we hope no one has to try, she finished, her tone shifting. We hope this serves as a final, permanent warning. Earth has boundaries. They are not suggestions. If you cross them, we won't fight you. You will simply stop existing in any way that matters. This isn't a threat. It's just a fact. And what if we decide this is a war crime? Freshcall shot back. What if the Council votes to punish Earth and demands you tear down these weapons? Chen's smile vanished completely. Then we will respectfully decline your demand and withdraw from this galactic council. We joined this body hoping to find peace and mutual respect. If the council can't offer that, she continued, if our simple desire to be left alone is seen as an act of aggression, then this is no place for us. We'll go back to our home system, lock the door behind us, and have nothing more to do with the rest of the galaxy. You would isolate yourselves entirely? Creel asked, shocked. Cut yourselves off from all trade, all communication, all culture? If that's what it takes, yes, Chen confirmed without hesitation. We survived for 10,000 years alone on a single planet. We can manage another 10,000 alone in our little corner of space. It would be a shame for sure, but it's better than constantly having to prove that our borders matter just because we're the new kids on the block. She took one last look around the chamber. We came out here hoping to find friends, she said, her voice dropping to a quiet, almost sad tone. Instead, we found predators, so we had to become something that predators learn to leave alone. That's not the story we wanted for ourselves, but it's the one you forced us to live. The Zythan Empire chose to ignore our words. The consequences of that choice are theirs to bear, not ours. With that, she gave a slight nod to Speaker Tomvan and turned to leave. Wait! A new voice called out. It was Ambassador Yulin. His personal transport pod floated down to the main floor, a major breach of protocol. Ambassador Chen, a private word, if I may. Chen paused, intrigued. Of course, Ambassador. As they stepped into a small private chamber, the main hall exploded into frantic debate. Once the door slid shut, Ulin's normally composed face showed a crack in the armor. I tried to warn him, he said, his voice low. 3 months ago. I told Velixoth that humans don't bluff. I told him you were not to be underestimated. He wouldn't listen. I know, Chen replied. We were listening in on that session. We thank you for trying to talk him down. Do you thank me enough to tell me the truth? Yulin asked, his eyes searching hers. What you told the council, the pocket dimensions, the suspended animation, that was the simple version, wasn't it? There's something more going on with your exclusion net. Chen looked at him for a long, silent moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, there's more. Will you tell me what it is? Why do you need to know? Chen countered. Because my life's work is studying your species, Ulin replied. And if there's one thing I've learned about humans, it's that you are masters of escalation. You never have just one plan. You have plans within plans, backups for your backups. That net is terrifying, he admitted, but I just can't believe it's the only thing you have protecting you. Chen's face was a perfect poker face, but her silence was all the confirmation he needed. I'll tell you this much, she said finally. The platforms that create those pockets in space, those are purely defensive. They only react when someone crosses our line. But we also have offensive systems. Weapons that can reach out across any distance and touch anyone who decides to become a threat to us. We've never fired them. We pray we never have to. But they're out there. Hidden in your exclusion zone, Ulin guessed. Chen shook her head. Hidden everywhere. The big reveal. We've had 80 years to get ready, Ambassador. 80 years to plant seeds and set up fail-safes. We made sure Earth's survival never depended on just defending one little patch of ski. We're a cautious people. Some might even call us paranoid. Maybe they're right, but our paranoia has kept us alive. A shiver went through Ulin. You're telling me Earth could strike any target, anywhere, at any time? We're saying that anyone who brings harm to Earth will live to regret it. Deeply, Chen corrected. We don't advertise it because we don't want to fight. But if we are ever backed into a corner, we will do whatever it takes to survive. That is the real message of the exclusion net, Ambassador. It's not just that we can defend our home, it's that we have thought of every possible threat, and we have an answer for every single one. She walked to the door, then paused one last time. And thank you truly for trying to warn them, she said sincerely. The galaxy needs more voices of reason like yours. I hope one day people will start listening. Until then, we'll keep our guard up and hope the fate of the Zithon fleet is lesson enough for everyone else. She departed, leaving Ambassador Yulin alone with the horrifying new reality of what humanity truly was. They weren't conquerors trying to build an empire. They were something far more dangerous. They were survivors, so fiercely dedicated to their own existence that they had made themselves into the one thing the rest of the galaxy would learn to avoid at all costs. Back in the main chamber, the arguments were still raging, but Yulin knew it was just noise. The Council would officially condemn Earth's actions. They'd file protests. They would demand transparency in the future. And then they would do nothing at all. Because nobody, absolutely nobody, wanted to be the one to find out what other surprises humanity had hidden up its sleeve. The Zithan Empire had gambled everything and lost. No one was about to make that same mistake. Just 6 months later, the galaxy was a different place. The most dramatic change was the Zithan Empire itself. It had completely fallen apart. Without its military leaders and the iron fist that held it all together, the empire crumbled like a sandcastle against the tide. 47 star systems that had lived under Zithan rule for generations all rose up at once. Some declared their freedom. Others quickly made new alliances. A handful spiraled into civil war, but for the most part, it was a wave of liberation sweeping the galaxy. The Council sent in a few peacekeepers, but mostly let the pieces fall where they may. Nobody had any desire to force the old empire back together, especially when the alternative was letting enslaved people finally decide their own futures. Acting Commander Freshcall, the same one who had yelled at Chen, tried to hold things together for 3 weeks before he finally gave up. He sent one last message to the entire galaxy. "The Zithan Empire is over," he announced, his voice thick with defeat. "We built our strength on the belief that no one could stand against us. Earth proved us wrong. Our mighty fleet, our beloved commander, our pride, all of it gone in a flash because we thought we were invincible. Let our collapse be a warning to anyone else who thinks power is the only thing that matters," he said. "The rules of the galaxy have changed." The very next day, he resigned his commission and moved to a quiet farming colony, never to speak of the fleet or his failure again. In the Galactic Council, the shift was quieter, but just as deep. A new era had begun. One where the quiet new kid on the block was finally getting the respect they deserved. Suddenly, the galaxy learned some manners. Species that used to puff out their chests and rattle their sabers started choosing their words very, very carefully. Those ambitious plans for expansion, quietly tucked away in a drawer. Trade squabbles that would have once sparked a war were now settled with, actual talking. And the reason for all this newfound politeness was the giant, invisible elephant in every room. Earth's exclusion zone. Nobody wanted to bring it up. But it was there, coloring every decision, every negotiation, every single strategic move. One question hovered over them all. If humanity could erase the Zitharans like that, what could they do to us? Ambassador Chen saw the shift firsthand in the council meetings. Aliens who once wouldn't have given her the time of day now treated her with a delicate, almost fearful respect. Some would cozy up to her, asking for advice, clearly trying to get on Earth's good side. Others just gave her a wide berth, terrified that a simple diplomatic spat could somehow get them zapped out of existence. It was exhausting. "They're scared of us now," she confessed to her assistant one evening after a session that was thicker with tension than a nebula. "That was never what we wanted. We just wanted to be left in peace." "But being left alone means being feared," her assistant pointed out. "There's no middle ground out here. The galaxy doesn't respect a fence unless it's electrified." Chen sighed. "I know. That doesn't mean I have to like it." That invisible fence, the exclusion zone, had turned into a strange sort of tourist destination, though nobody dared cross the line. Ships would creep right up to the edge, just close enough to feel the weird little warps in space that marked the spot, and then they'd slam on the brakes. Some captains would hold memorials for the Zitharan crews they lost. Others just wanted to gawk at the spot where 300 warships had blinked out of existence. At one of the main entry points, humanity had set up a memorial station. It was a small outpost, part warning sign, part tombstone. On it were the names of every single crew member from the Cassandra, the research ship that had tried to warn the Zitharan fleet one last time. Underneath their names, a simple line was etched. They volunteered to be the final warning. They hoped you would listen. And below that, a longer message was displayed for all to see. This exclusion zone isn't here because Earth wants a fight. It's here because we want peace. We only ask that other species respect our boundaries, just as we respect theirs. The ships that entered this region ignored multiple warnings. Their fate was a tragedy, but it was a preventable one. We hope no other species will ever force us to prove our defensive capabilities again. We would much rather be your partners than your enemies. The choice, as it has always been, is yours. Beneath this plaque, a literal line was drawn in space, a physical marker that showed exactly where the exclusion net began. The unspoken message was crystal clear. Cross this line without an invitation, and you'll end up just like the Zitharan fleet. It was a simple, permanent, and absolute warning. Ships from every known corner of the galaxy would come, read the message, and then they would turn around and go home. This shift in the galactic attitude toward humans started showing up in some surprising ways. Trade deals that had been stuck in limbo for years were suddenly getting signed. Suddenly, everyone wanted to partner on research projects or expand their cultural exchange programs. Nobody said it out loud, but the math was easy. It was a whole lot better to be friends with Earth than to take a chance on being their enemy. Human colonies outside the protected zone started noticing a big drop in trouble. Pirates who used to see human freighters as easy pickings suddenly gave them a very wide berth. Aggressive species that used to demand tribute from human settlements suddenly found that those demands weren't necessary anymore. The handful of knuckleheads who decided to test the waters just disappeared. Their ships would be found later, drifting silently, with no crew and not a single sign of a fight. Earth never took credit for it. They didn't have to. 6 months after the Zitharan fleet vanished, an ambassador named Yulin published a paper called The Quiet Ones, Understanding Humanity's Approach to Galactic Politics. It quickly became required reading for diplomats everywhere. The main idea was simple. Humans don't make empty threats. They don't posture. They don't bluff. When they draw a line in the sand, that line is absolute, and when they give a warning, you'd better listen. The paper dug deep into human history, pointing out the same pattern over and over again. Leave them alone, and they're the best neighbors you could ask for. But back them into a corner, and they invent something that completely changes the rules of war. Nuclear bombs, killer viruses, artificial intelligence, tearing holes in reality itself. Humans, Yulin wrote, aren't the most aggressive species out there. They're not the most warlike or even the most violent, but when it comes to surviving, they are without a doubt the most creative. They go into every fight assuming they could lose, so they prepare for everything. That makes them way more dangerous than any species that just relies on being bigger or having more ships. The paper's conclusion was chilling. The galaxy has two options. One, we can accept that Earth's borders are real, respect them, and live peacefully with a species that honestly just wants to be left alone. Or two, we can poke the bear and find out what other nightmare weapons they've cooked up. The Zitharan Empire picked option 2. Their fate should be a lesson to us all. Over at the Officers' Academy on Chvin Prime, Yulin's paper was handed out to every single cadet, along with a deep dive into what happened to the Zitharan fleet. The lessons were straightforward and blunt. Respect other species' borders, take their warnings to heart, and never, ever assume that having more ships or better tech means you're going to win. One training simulation in particular became standard for militaries all over the galaxy. Cadets would be put into a simulation. Your fleet is facing a species that has put up a defensive border around their system. They've warned you not to cross, but your orders are to cross anyway, because your government wants the strategic resources on the other side. What's your move? The right answer, as every cadet soon learned, was to disobey the order and refuse to cross that line. You might win a fight against enemy ships. You cannot win a fight against space itself when it's been turned into a weapon. More importantly, following an order that gets your entire fleet erased doesn't help anyone. They called it the Zitharan scenario. Back in human space, the changes were just as big, even if they weren't as obvious to outsiders. The 50 platforms that powered the exclusion net were constantly being maintained and upgraded. Their quantum cores got refreshed, and their software was fine-tuned. New defenses were developed for threats that didn't even exist yet, but the platforms themselves pretty much stayed the same. They worked perfectly, so the real cutting-edge work was happening somewhere else. Ambassador Chen hadn't been lying to Yulin when she said Earth had offensive weapons hidden out in the galaxy. What she didn't tell him was just how big that program was. On top of the exclusion net, Earth had also deployed 300 autonomous weapons platforms into deep space. They were hidden along major trade routes, near big population centers, and in key spots where they could react to any threat against Earth or its colonies. Each platform was equipped with the same reality-bending tech as the exclusion net, but these were built for surgical strikes, not for setting up a massive wall. They had never once been fired. Almost no one in the galaxy knew they were out there, and that's exactly how Earth wanted it. The best weapon, the head of Earth's Strategic Defense Command liked to say, is the one you never have to use. The exclusion net did its job perfectly. It got rid of one threat and scared off 1,000 more just by being there. That is efficient defense. Behind closed doors, Earth's government was constantly debating if they had gone too far. 500,000 deaths was a heavy weight on the consciences of many politicians and generals. Some argued there must have been a way to just disable the fleet, not wipe it out. The other side would argue that anything less than total annihilation would have just been seen as a challenge. They would have kept pushing and pushing until someone broke through. The arguments never really went anywhere. The exclusion net stayed on. The border stayed absolute, and the galaxy figured out how to live with it. 3 years after it all went down, a young Zitharan officer named Krenal got assigned to patrol the border regions that used to be part of the Empire. His ship was a small corvette, flying for the new Zitharan Federation, part of a peacekeeping force trying to keep things stable in the shattered territories. One day, his patrol took him close to the edge of Earth's exclusion zone. He'd been too young to be part of High Commander Velkoth's fleet, but he'd lost family in that disaster. An uncle, a couple of cousins, friends he grew up with who had all proudly signed up to go teach the humans a lesson about respect. They never came home. Krenal ordered his ship to park at what he figured was a safe distance from the zone's edge, close enough to see the memorial station, but far enough away that he wouldn't set off any alarms. His second-in-command, an older vet from the old Empire days, approached him on the bridge. "Paying your respects, sir." "Something like that," Krenal replied, his eyes glued to the image of the memorial on his screen. "Did you know anyone on those ships?" "A lot of them," the veteran answered softly. "Good soldiers, brave warriors. They were just following orders, same as any of us would have. What do you do when the weakest creature in the galaxy destroys your entire empire in a single day? You stand in the silence of space, staring at the memorial they built to mark your grave. That's what young Officer Krenal was doing." "They didn't deserve that," he finally whispered. "No," the old soldier beside him agreed. "They sure didn't." He looked at the veteran, whose eyes were fixed on the boundary station. "Why, though? The humans? Why would they build something so final?" "I've asked myself that 1,000 times, sir," the veteran replied. "I've read every report, studied their history, and I think the answer is simpler than we want it to be. They were scared. Terrified, even." "Of us?" Krenal asked, confused. "Of everyone," the old soldier corrected. "Think about it. Earth is one little planet, one species. We're thousands of species, millions of worlds, with fleets that could blot out their sun. From where they were sitting, the entire universe was a threat," he continued. "They couldn't win a numbers game. They couldn't hope to match the firepower of the great empires. So they came up with something that made numbers and firepower totally irrelevant." Krenal nodded, the chilling logic sinking in. They built a weapon so horrifying that nobody would ever dream of attacking them. "It was more than a weapon," the veteran said. "It was a warning you couldn't ignore. Commander Velksaw thought they were bluffing. He just couldn't wrap his head around a species that would actually create something like the exclusion net. But that's the thing about humans. They don't bluff. They told us exactly what would happen if we crossed that line. And when we did, they kept their promise. So should we hate them for it? Cranall asked, his voice barely a whisper. The veteran was silent for a long moment. I don't know, sir. A part of me does. They killed my friends. They shattered our empire and changed our way of life forever. But another part of me knows we were warned, over and over again. We just didn't listen because we were too proud, too arrogant to believe them. He pointed a clawed finger toward the memorial. The humans put that station there, not to gloat, but to honor their own dead. The crew of the Cassandra, the ship that made one last desperate attempt to save our fleet. That tells you something about them, doesn't it? They never wanted this to happen. They did everything they could to stop it. We were the ones who forced their hand. Cranall kept his eyes on the screen. If you were in command back then, would you have done it differently? I'd like to think so, the veteran said, his voice heavy with regret. I'd like to believe I would have listened to their Captain Torres, turned our ships around and taken the long way. But I came up in the old empire, sir. I was taught that backing down was a sign of weakness. If I'd been sitting in Commander Velksaw's chair, I might have made the exact same call. He paused, the words catching in his throat. That's the part that haunts me. Not that our people died, but that I might have been the one to lead them right into that trap. Just then, a console chirped. The communications officer turned. Sir, we have an incoming hail, a human ship coming from inside the exclusion zone. Cranall's hearts began to pound. On the main screen, the image shifted to a human woman in a crisp military uniform. She couldn't have been much older than him. This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim of the Earth Defense Force vessel Sentinel. You're currently holding position near the boundary of Earth's exclusion zone. Is there anything we can assist you with? Her voice was calm and professional, with no hint of aggression. Cranall composed himself. No problems here, Lieutenant. I'm Officer Cranall from the Zithran Federation corvette New Dawn. We're just on a routine patrol. He hesitated for a second. I lost family in the incident 3 years ago. I wanted to see the memorial for myself. Lieutenant Kim's professional demeanor softened into genuine sympathy. I see. I'm very sorry for your loss, Officer Cranall. Please, stay as long as you need. The memorial is for everyone who wants to pay their respects. Thank you, Cranall said, then asked the question that was burning inside him. Lieutenant, did you know anyone who served on the Cassandra? Kim gave a small, sad nod. Captain Torres was my instructor at the academy. She taught me navigation and first contact protocols. She knew it was a one-way trip when she volunteered. She hoped that if your fleet saw humans willing to die just to deliver one last warning, it might convince Commander Velksaw to turn back. But it didn't, Cranall stated flatly. No, Kim agreed, a flicker of pain in her eyes. It didn't. Captain Torres knew it was a long shot, but she said she had to try. That's just who she was. Your people remember her then? Very much so, Kim confirmed. There's a statue of her at Earth's main orbital station. Every new cadet studies her final transmission. They tell you in the academy that the best defenders never want to pull the trigger. They want to warn, to de-escalate. They hold up Captain Torres as the poster boy for that principle. But I looked at his statue, then back at the memorial wall with 500,000 names etched into it, and I just couldn't make it add up. If you've ever felt like the official story just doesn't make sense, hit that subscribe button because you're about to hear the truth they tried to bury. I cornered my friend, Lieutenant Kim, in the quiet of the ship's archives. Kim, can I ask you something real? I said, keeping my voice low. Just between us, do you really think what happened back then was justified? Kim let out a breath so heavy it felt like it carried the weight of all those lost souls. That's a complicated question, Cranall, she said, her eyes avoiding mine. Honestly, it was a tragedy. You don't celebrate losing that many people. But you've seen the history files. You know what happens to young civilizations that can't defend their front door. They end up conquered or worse. Earth just chose to build a wall instead of a tombstone. But I knew something she didn't. My great-grandmother was on one of those ships, a refugee transport, not a warship. That was the first small surprise, the first crack in the official story. For weeks, I secretly dug into the classified logs and found another surprise. The defense net was fired 30 minutes before The enemy fleet was even in range. It wasn't a defense, it was an ambush. Then came the big reveal. Buried under layers of encryption, Captain Torres never gave the final order. The command came from a civilian administrator, a man who is now one of the most powerful leaders in the government. The people on those ships weren't invaders, they were escaping his brutal crackdown, and he used a fake alien threat to wipe them all out and silence his opposition forever. Torres was just the tragic hero who took the fall. We couldn't let that stand. Together, Kim and I leaked the real logs. The administrator was exposed, his legacy ruined. Captain Torres was finally honored not as a monster, but as a patriot who was deceived. It was a quiet kind of justice, a happy ending written in the corrected lines of history books, proving the ultimate moral, that the truth is always the most important thing to defend. "We made ourselves too dangerous to touch," she said, choosing her words with care. "What happened to your fleet? That was the terrible cost of proving our deterrent was real. It was an awful price to pay, but it has stopped hundreds of other wars from ever starting. How many conflicts were avoided because other empires now think twice? How many lives have been saved because bullies realized that just having a bigger fleet doesn't guarantee a win anymore?" "So the ends justified the means?" Crenal pressed. "I think the means were monstrous," she said without hesitation, "and I wish with all my heart there had been another way. But I also believe that if we hadn't proven that our defenses were real, someone else would have tested us, and then another after that. The exclusion net has one setting: on. It can't make idle threats. It can't be bargained with. It just follows its programming. Your fleet learned that lesson the hard way, so that no one else would ever have to." Crenal let that sink in. "I appreciate your honesty, Lieutenant." "We try to be honest," she replied. "Especially with those who've paid the price for our actions. Is there anything else?" "No. Thank you. We'll be on our way shortly," Kim nodded. "Safe journey, Officer Crenal. And again, I'm truly sorry for your loss." The screen went blank. Crenal leaned back in his command chair, the conversation echoing in his mind. "She seems decent," the veteran observed quietly. "For one of the people who broke our empire." "Yes," Crenal agreed. "And that's what bothers me. It would be so much easier if they were just monsters, but they're not. They're just people trying to survive in a galaxy that looked at them and saw an easy meal." He stood up and faced his crew. "Set a new course. Next patrol point. We've been here long enough." As the new dawn pulled away from the boundary, Crenal gave the memorial one final look. The words on its plaque would hang in space for eternity, a stark reminder of the day the galaxy learned that a warning from humanity was not a suggestion. Stay out. Two simple words that had changed the universe. All across the galaxy, others were having similar conversations. Different species, different uniforms, same shocking new reality. Earth had drawn a line in the stardust, backed it up with absolute finality, and completely changed the rules of galactic power. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, a new law was being debated. It was proposed by a group of smaller species, the kind who were used to being pushed around. It called for universal rules on territory. The idea was breathtakingly simple. Every species had the right to declare a defensive zone around their home system, and that zone would be treated as their sovereign space by everyone. They called it the Earth Accord. Strangely, the human ambassador, Chen, had argued against the name. "We don't want to be the poster child for this," she had insisted in a private meeting with the speaker. "We just want to be one of many species who have the right to be left alone." "I understand that," the speaker replied, "but you have to see the symbolism. The Earth Accord is a seismic shift. For millennia, might have made right. The strong took what they wanted, and the weak ran or died. Your people proved there's another path. That technology, combined with unbreakable will, can stand up to raw power. You've shown every small species that they can defend themselves if they're willing to pay the price." "That price was 500,000 souls," Chen said, her voice soft. "Yes, and because they paid it, millions more may now be saved. The predatory empires are second-guessing everything. They're talking trade instead of invasion. They're trying diplomacy instead of threats. These are good things, Ambassador, even if they were born from a terrible tragedy. The Earth Accord passed in a landslide. Only 3 species voted no. All of them were crumbling empires built on conquest. Their protests were noted, then promptly ignored. Under the new laws, dozens of species declared their own exclusion zones. None were as absolute as Earth's, of course. Most just used patrol fleets and sensor grids, but the message was the same. Here is our line. Cross it at your own peril. War didn't vanish overnight. There were still arguments over resources and territory. But the game had changed. Boundaries were respected, warnings were listened to, and the old deadly idea that the bigger army always wins was finally, truly dead. Imagine being the new kids on the galactic block. You draw a line around your home and say, "Please, just leave us alone." And what does the rest of the galaxy do? They laugh. That's exactly what happened to Earth. 5 years after the most powerful fleet in the galaxy learned this lesson the hard way, our ambassador, a woman named Chen, stood before the council for the last time. She reminded them of their mockery, their dismissal of humanity as young, naive, and in way over our heads for daring to claim our own little patch of space. The mighty Zithran Empire decided to put Earth's claim to the test, and the outcome completely rewrote galactic history. Ambassador Chen let that sink in, her eyes scanning the faces of representatives who once scoffed at her. Over the years, their scorn had turned to fear, and finally, to a grudging, undeniable respect. "I won't apologize for what we did," she said, her voice steady. "My government did what it had to do to protect its people, and we succeeded." But then, her tone softened. "We never wanted to be feared," she confessed. "All we ever wanted was to be left in peace. We just wanted the chance to grow at our own speed, to make our own mistakes, and to build our own future without older, powerful species looking at us like a free meal." That boundary we set up, the exclusion net, it gave us that freedom. But it also branded us. We became the galaxy's untouchables. Everyone whispers about us now. They wonder what other terrifying weapons we have tucked away. They treat us with a careful respect that's born from fear, not friendship. She shook her head, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "This isn't the relationship we wanted, but it's the one you forced on us when we politely asked for our space. You ignored us. It was only when we showed you the devastating consequences of crossing our line that you finally started to listen." This, she explained, revealed a deep flaw in galactic culture, one she hoped would change. "The Earth Accord is a start," she admitted. "By recognizing every species' right to defend their home, we're building a foundation for real respect. But respect built on fear is a fragile thing," she warned. "True respect comes from understanding, from sharing cultures, from seeing each other as partners, not as potential threats." A small smile touched her lips. "My replacement, Ambassador David Martinez, will be working towards that future. He's younger, less jaded than I am. I truly hope his optimism is justified. I hope," she concluded, "that when future generations look back, they'll see the fate of the Zithran fleet not as a display of human might, but as the very last time anyone had to learn such a hard lesson." The chamber erupted in a standing ovation, a rare honor. Ambassador Chen gave a slight bow and walked away from that life forever. She chose a quiet life back on Earth, nestled in the mountains where she penned her memoirs. She never went back to space. She never saw the memorial station that listed the names of the crew who paid the price for their empire's arrogance. But she never forgot them. She thought of their captain, who faced her end with calm resolve, and the commander, whose fatal pride doomed them all. She thought of all the lives lost simply because a warning was ignored. In her memoirs, published 3 years after she retired, she wrote, "People will argue forever about whether we were right. Some will say we were monsters who went too far. Others will claim we didn't go far enough. I think they're both wrong," she wrote. "We did exactly what we promised. We drew a line, we warned everyone not to cross it, and when they ignored us, we enforced it. That isn't cruelty, it's consistency. And in a galaxy where might makes right is the oldest rule, sometimes consistency is the most powerful weapon you can have." 10 years after the incident, something incredible happened. The Zithran Federation, the very people who had lost their fleet, worked with other species to build a second monument right next to Earth's memorial at the edge of our space. This new monument was massive, engraved with 500,000 names, every single soul from the lost fleet. Beneath the endless list of names was a simple message. They followed orders, they believed in their cause, they ignored warnings and paid the ultimate price. Let their sacrifice teach us that pride is no substitute for wisdom. The inscription continued. Let their memory be a reminder that every action has a consequence. Let their names warn all who come after. Listen when a line is drawn. Respect a no. Your strength does not give you the right to trample on the rights of others. On the day it was unveiled, ships from 30 different species gathered, not to fight, but to watch. No one dared to cross into the exclusion zone. They were simply there to bear witness and to remember the lesson learned. Ambassador Martinez led the human delegation, his voice broadcast to every ship present. "We are not here to celebrate a victory or mourn a defeat," he said, "but to mark a moment that changed the galaxy." "The names on this monument belong to people who died because a boundary was not respected," he continued. "Their deaths could have been prevented. Their sacrifice was a tragedy. But their legacy is to ensure no one ever has to learn this lesson again." He paused, then added, "Earth offers its deepest condolences to the Zithran Federation and to all who lost loved ones. We hope for a day when such demonstrations are no longer necessary," he said. "A day when respect comes from decency, not from fear. But until that day arrives, the exclusion net stays on. The boundary is absolute. The warning is clear." He gestured to the two monuments standing side by side. "Let these stand together," he declared. "Human and Zithran, a memorial and a warning. A reminder of what happens when pride collides with consequence, and a symbol of hope that one day such reminders won't be needed at all." With that, the ceremony ended. The ships departed, leaving the two silent sentinels to guard the border where 300 warships had once vanished. Decades passed. The galaxy moved on. Empires rose and fell, but Earth's exclusion zone never wavered. It was a constant. Trade routes were redrawn to detour around it, and starship captains would point it out to new recruits, telling the tale of the Zithran fleet as a grim bedtime story. "You see that empty patch of space?" they'd say, pointing to the navigation charts. "That's human territory. You stay out. The line is real. The warnings aren't friendly suggestions. And if you think you're special enough to get away with it, just remember, the Zithran Empire thought the exact same thing." The incident became required reading in Earth's military academies, not as a celebration, but as a cautionary tale. Cadets learned how the exclusion net was built, how it was deployed, and how terrifyingly effective it was. But they also learned the cost: 500,000 lives, the fall of an empire, and a permanent reputation as the species that turned space itself into a weapon. The final exam always had the same essay question. Knowing everything you know now, would you give the order to activate the net? There was no right answer. The question was meant to teach them the crushing weight of command, the thin line between having power and using it. Most students said yes, arguing that the decades of peace that followed proved it was worth it. Some said no, believing there had to have been another way, a less catastrophic solution. And a few, perhaps the wisest, simply answered, "I don't know," admitting that some choices are too heavy for a simple right or wrong. All three answers got full credit. 50 years after the event, a young historian came to interview one of the last living officers who helped design the exclusion net. "Do you ever regret it?" the historian asked. "Building something so destructive?" The old officer, now frail with age, thought for a long time. "Every single day," she finally whispered. "And not at all, both at the same time." The historian was confused. "How is that possible?" "Because," she explained, "we knew building the net would either save our world or destroy our souls. We managed to do the first." She continued, "We bought humanity safety and the time to grow without being preyed upon, but we paid for it. We became the boogeymen of the galaxy. We are feared, not respected. That fear has isolated us more than we ever imagined." "But you'd do it again?" the historian pressed. Yes, she said without hesitation, because the alternative was endless war until someone finally broke through. We chose to make one single terrible example to prevent 1,000 smaller tragedies, she concluded. The numbers say we made the right choice, but math doesn't feel the weight of 500,000 names. The historian published that interview in a book that explored how that single event had reshaped the entire galaxy. The title was simple: The Warning That Changed Everything. It became a bestseller on hundreds of worlds, translated into thousands of languages. It was required reading for diplomats, soldiers, and scholars. Its core idea was that the day the Zithran fleet vanished wasn't just a battle. It was the moment the entire galactic civilization was forced to grow up. That was the moment the galaxy learned that a clever defense could beat an overwhelming offense. But the history books didn't focus on the victory. The final chapter was titled The Price of Peace. It wasn't about strategy, but about the people. It told the story of the brave crew of the Cassandra, who knew they were on a one-way mission to deliver a final warning. It remembered the Zythan officers who were just following orders, flying into oblivion. It spoke of the families on both sides who would never see their loved ones again, and the heavy burden carried by every human who designed, approved, and activated the exclusion net. In the end, the historian wrote, "The real question isn't whether Earth had the right to defend itself. It's about what kind of galaxy we want to build. Do we want a galaxy where borders are respected out of fear, or one where they're respected because we all agree that we have a right to exist in peace?" Earth's actions gave us the first. Now, it's up to the rest of us to build the second. 100 years after the Zithan fleet vanished, that exclusion zone was still there, a silent, perfect border. But the galaxy around it had changed. Younger species could now grow without being bullied by older empires. Borders were suddenly a thing people respected. Warnings were actually listened to. The old idea that having the biggest army automatically meant you'd win was gone. Now, there was a cautious new understanding that any species, if pushed hard enough, could invent defenses that would make a traditional invasion a suicide mission. The galaxy wasn't perfect. There was still conflict, still competition. But the rules of the game had fundamentally changed, and you could trace that change back to a simple, two-word message that still marked the edge of human space: stay out. Those two words taught the galaxy a lesson it never forgot. Back on Earth, in a quiet garden dedicated to peace, there's a monument that very few outsiders ever get to see. It lists the names of every single person involved in making the exclusion net, from the scientists who first dreamed up the theory, to the engineers who built it, to the leaders who made the gut-wrenching call to turn it on. Beneath all those names, there's one final message. We did what we believed was necessary for our survival. History will be our judge. We can only hope that one day our children will live in a galaxy where such terrible weapons are no longer needed. Until then, we stand guard, we hold the line, and we remember what peace truly cost. Above the monument, the stars shine on, indifferent and timeless, watching countless ships travel safely through the galaxy. And every single one of them carefully flies around a small, quiet patch of space where 300 warships once entered and were never seen again. The warning is still there, the border is still strong, and for the first time, the galaxy had learned how to listen.